Welcome to another Presentation Expressway. I'm Barry Habib. You know, the number one law of economics is supply and demand, and it truly applies in housing. The more demand and less supply, prices, like we have seen, get pressured higher. So is there a change? Is there something going on that would spoil that dynamic? Is there a lot of inventory coming on the market? We know that buyer demand is being tempered right now because of higher rates and higher prices, certainly. But there has been such a shortage of housing and so much overwhelming demand. Is it enough to stem the tide, and is it enough to reverse course? Well, let's examine this together. I'm going to pull up some slides to share with you for this Presentation Expressway. So first off, when we take a look at housing, supply versus demand, we want to look at the demand side of this first. So the way to look at demand in housing is by households being formed. So what is a household formation? If someone leaves the shelter of mom and dad and they go out and get their own place, whether it's buying or renting, that is a new household that's being formed. They turned on the electric for the first time for them. Or it could be a couple that's been living together but now split up, and one of the individuals that was living with someone else now branches off and gets their own place. So this is a formation. And the distinction here over someone who is just selling their home and moving is that these people don't have a home to sell. So they're occupying a new property without relinquishing one, without selling one or leaving one behind. So therefore, they are absorbing the supply. So this is the demand. This is a household formation. And in the United States right now, there's 1.4 million households being formed. That's a pretty big number. And if you take a look at it, historically speaking, this is your COVID up and down, it's relatively high. In fact, it's above the average that you see in green here. So it's a pretty big number that you see in formation. So there's still quite a bit of this going on. Now, when we look at supply, a lot of people point to, well, where does the supply come from? It can't be from an existing individual who lives in a home, because as they sell their home, they need to go buy one. So that leaves inventory neutral. So the supply comes from new construction. So a lot of folks look to housing starts, and that's logical to kind of start there. But if you look at housing starts, which are currently at 1.7 million, you have to account for the fact that every year about 100,000 homes get destroyed or retired or replaced annually. So if you're starting 1.7 million, it means we'll be left with 1.6 million homes after you replace those that are being retired in the marketplace or destroyed. So that's 1.6 million new supply coming to the market. And if you take a look at the demand, well, we just told you there's about 1.4 million units that are needed. So that means it looks like there's an apparent surplus of 200,000. Thing of it is if you look at housing starts, like most people do, that includes you putting a shovel in the ground. Well, you can't move into that yet, right? So we don't want to look at starts. We want to look at completions, because that's what you can move into. And there's 1.3 million of those. Account for those destroyed, that leaves 1.2 million, and household formations are 1.4. So guess what? Even though the supply is already very, very low, it's getting worse. 200,000 less homes than the demand right now, which is very supportive of pricing. And even if this were to reverse, and even if we were to get 200,000 more homes, there's such a hole already where we may be 2 million homes short from equilibrium right now, that it will take a while to eat into that. But for now, we're going into the greater shortage situation. And we take a look at existing home inventory. Existing home inventory has been through the years decreasing. Now you see about 1 million homes on the market now, and many people are saying, hey, you know what? We're seeing a lot more inventory come on the market, and you can see it on this chart here, huh? So what's going on with existing homes? Why are more coming on the marketplace? Well, this happens, if you notice, every single year in the spring. So think about this. Maybe you might recall when you were a kid in school, and if in the middle of a school year, a new kid came into the class, many of the friendships were already made and those cliques were already formed. So it made it a little more difficult for that new child to come in. Parents are cognizant of that. And what they would prefer is if their child enters a new school at the beginning of the year so that they can kind of assimilate a lot easier. Well, in order to do that, that means they have to have closed on the home during the summer months and completed the transaction, which means that they would have had to have gone shopping for the home, or if they're selling a home, put their home up for sale in the spring. And that's why you call it the spring home buying season. It's not just because the flowers are in bloom, folks. It has a lot to do with school. So when you take a look every year, you see a similar pattern, except notice the trend. The highs are lower, the lows are lower. So this is very natural to see this inventory buildup. But there's more to this story, and this is where it gets really interesting. See these million homes for sale, that's inventory, but what's counted in inventory is something very interesting. Out of the million homes for sale, it includes those under contract. And right now, the market has been so hot that 60% of the homes that are not yet closed are already under contract. So if I'm shopping for a home, I'm not be able to purchase a home that's already under contract to somebody else that's closing in a little bit of time here. I need to get one that's not. That means there's only 400,000 homes in this entire country to pick from. A country of 330 million with 130 million households. This is slim pickings. And to give you just some context here as to what 400,000 homes look like historically, you could take a look. It is very, very little. Now, while you might see here active listings at 1.5 million, another aspect of it is that represents 75% of the total market. So the 25% at this point in time, there's 2 million homes for sale, 25% of them under contract, 75% available. Today, 1 million homes in existing home inventory, but 600 under contract or 60% under contract, only 40% available. So homes are selling very, very quickly. And as far as, is there a lot more inventory on the market? Well, the answer is no, a little more. But from the lowest point ever, just 33,000 active listings have increased from them. And again, it's typical to see this during the spring home buying season for that to happen, but it isn't as if there's a huge rush of inventory coming on the marketplace. Now, look, are markets and pockets of the market going to be different? We're talking about national numbers here. So every real estate market is a little different, but by and large, there is still a lack of supply. And while demand is definitely waning because of higher interest rates and because of higher home prices, we agree, certainly, but there still is enough activity to support prices. So while the increases in home prices may not be there at the levels that they were, and we don't want them to be, it isn't as if there's the ability in this marketplace to see enormous price drops on a year-over-year basis. You might see listings come down to earth where sellers who put unrealistic prices start reducing prices of their listings, but it isn't going to be where on a year-over-year basis you're going to see drops. And another reason for that is vacancies. You know, when your home is vacant and you're carrying two houses, so you purchased a new home, the home you're selling is vacant, you look at those carrying costs, man, mortgage, insurance, taxes, and then all the maintenance on it. Grass still has to be cut, electric and things of that nature that have to be paid. It can be several $1,000s every month. So it's easy to justify in the back of your mind and say, hey, you know what? Let me just drop the price. Let me just get rid of this thing because the carrying costs are killing me. And that's where you see price reductions. That's what you had in 2007 when about 3% of the entire housing stock was vacant. That's a lot. Today, it's an all-time low, 0.8%. So there isn't the incentive to say, hey, man, I'm carrying two houses here. I've got to unload this thing, and I don't care if I take a price hit for it. So you just don't have that type of price drop incentive. It looks like overall, the housing market should remain pretty healthy. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation expressway.